The Farms.com Wheat Report is brought to you by Altitude FX and BASF Canada.
So I'm Peter Johnson with the Ministry of Agriculture and Food, and I am the Provincial Cereal Specialist. And we want to talk about wheat. And wheat is an amazing crop, brings all sorts of great things to the table, and always is a struggle to get guys to grow it because it always doesn't seem to make enough profit. How do we make it more profitable? So let's start in the spring. If we're going to talk about spring wheat, planting date is incredibly critical. In all our trials, spring wheat responds more to planting date than barley does, than oats do. So really critical to do everything you can to plant that wheat earlier. I've always been astounded that in Western Canada, there isn't more focus on a thing we call frost seeding. So if you actually get out there in the fall and leave that ground nice and level and flat, and in fact in Montana, they will actually plant that wheat in December, it will sit frozen all winter long, start to grow as soon as it's right in the spring, and under dry conditions that works really well. In Ontario or in Quebec, that's not going to work very good because the soil stays too wet. But if we can frost seed in March, that really makes a difference. Of course, nobody wants to do that because everybody whines about their big expensive drill and doing damage to the drill. Get over it, but if you're not going to do that, please, whatever you can do to plant earlier is going to make a really big difference in yield because wheat doesn't like it hot through the grain fill period. Number two, what do? You add a starter fertilizer. So a seed place starter fertilizer in our trials is incredibly critical. What's really intriguing about that is that it doesn't matter so much about soil test. Soil test plays, it is important, but it's not nearly as important or the defining factor in wheat the way it is in some crops like soybeans. So regardless of your soil test, unless of course it's way crazy high for phosphorus, some seed place starter fertilizer, a high phosphorus seed place starter fertilizer, potash much less important on spring wheat or on winter wheat for that matter, that really brings something to the table. Probably in the range of 5 or 6 bushels per acre increase in yield from that seed place starter. Of course, then we can talk about weed control. That's of course incredibly critical in a spring wheat crop, less important in a winter wheat crop, but still one of the keys. That's a whole nother topic we could cover. The other key factor though, or two factors, is this whole nitrogen and fungicide scenario. So I'm a big believer in high yield wheat. You cannot grow high yield wheat without enough nitrogen and without a fungicide so that that wheat crop can actually utilize the nitrogen. I want to see on winter wheat 120 pounds of nitrogen, unless of course it's following peas. But if you're growing wheat after soybeans, it's 120 pounds of nitrogen, and then you must use a fusarium fungicide. We can argue about 2 fungicide program. I don't want to see 3 because in Ontario our growing season is not long enough to need 3 fungicides. But a 2 fungicide program, yeah, we'll argue about that, but 1 fungicide at fusarium timing is critical so that the plant can actually utilize that much nitrogen. On spring wheat, I think the same thing holds true. If you've never lodged your spring wheat, you're not using enough nitrogen. You want to just get it to the point where it's leaning. You don't want it to go flat, but leaning. And again, I really think that fusarium fungicide is incredibly critical. So those kind of things I think you have to focus in on. On the winter wheat side, just to sort of finish up with that thought process, it's the spring of 2014, and in Ontario and in much of the Great Lakes Basin, the wheat looks like crap. It's an incredibly tough winter. Hate what it's done to my wheat crop. And now I'm getting all these people that are saying, okay, if we're going to leave that wheat crop, we have all this bare ground out there, thin spots. I'm not going to manage that wheat crop anymore because it simply doesn't have the yield potential to make me money. Get over it. If you don't manage a poor crop, it will get poorer. So a poor crop unmanaged equals crap. If you actually go out there and say, yeah, this is not a good wheat crop, but I'm going to do everything I can to still manage that like it is a wheat crop, you'll be astounded at how much that wheat can respond, and you can actually end up with a much better result than you anticipated. So for example, when we've done this research, if you take a 60 bushel yield potential and don't manage it, you will get 50 bushels. If you take a 60 bushel wheat crop and you still manage it with enough nitrogen with that fusarium fungicide, suddenly it's not a 60 bushel crop, it's 70 or 75 bushels. It's still not my 100 bushel crop, but at least it's a wheat crop that we can do something with. So really critical. Wheat is the most responsive crop to management that we grow. Astoundingly enough, everybody wants to focus on corn and soybeans and manage them and forget about the wheat crop. Wrong answer. Manage the wheat crop, do things right. It will put dollars in your pocket. Keep it in the rotation because that will help your corn and soybeans. Have a nice day.
The Farms.com Wheat Report has been brought to you by Altitude FX and BASF Canada. Visit www.clearfield.ca/wheat for more cereal solutions.